So good evening and welcome to our webinar, Sustaining Special Education Through Connection, Teacher Well-Being and Family Partnerships. I'm Dr. Kristen Leck, Director of Graduate Programs in Special Education at Bay Path University, and I'm so pleased you've joined us for this important conversation. Teacher burnout has reached critical levels in K-12 education, particularly among educators serving diverse learners. While family engagement is often framed as a means to support students, it's also a powerful tool in sustaining educators. Research shows that when teachers build authentic and collaborative partnerships with families, they experience greater efficacy, lower stress levels, and stronger connections to their purpose. Tonight, we'll explore how cultivating strong relationships between educators, families, and colleagues can sustain our work in special education and help us navigate the challenges of teaching with compassion and resilience. We're joined by 5 outstanding panelists, each who bring a unique lens on this topic. First, we have Dr. Celia Utley, Director of Student Services for the Hadley Public Schools and a Bay Path University Practicum Supervisor. Next, we have Natalie Metzger, School Psychologist with the Quabbin Regional School District and Adjunct Instructor for Bay Path University. Dr. Catherine Benson, Curriculum Director for Lighthouse in Holyoke, and also a Bay Path University Practicum Supervisor. Rye Zamelski, Special Education Teacher for the Willie Ross School of the Deaf and an OSEP Scholar. And Olivia Sullivan, Special Education Teacher of the North Shore Educational Consortium and also an OSEP Scholar. Welcome to our panelists. Just a reminder, tonight's broadcast will be recorded and shared with all registrants after the airing. We'll begin with a panel discussion guided by a few key questions around teacher well-being and family partnerships. We have saved time at the end for audience questions. So if you have a question during the panelist discussion, I'd ask that you type it into the Q&A box on your screen. We have 3 themes that we're going to explore during the panel discussion. The first theme is centered around teacher well-being and sustainability. And our first question will go to Rye. Rye, teaching in special education can be both deeply rewarding and emotionally demanding. What practices or mindsets have helped you sustain your own well-being and sense of purpose in this work?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Rye Zamelski. I use she, her pronouns. I work at the Willie Ross School for the Deaf. And I think as I was thinking about this question, something that came to mind that I wanted to explain to you all tonight is about this idea of not taking myself so seriously, and that's sort of been a theme in my work. And I think, you know, some people might jump to the conclusion and say, well, you know, what we're doing is serious work and you can't just like blow it off. And it's like, it's not about that. It's about each thing that comes up, being able to sort of prioritize it or give it a level. You might want to come up with a system for yourself, like a 1 through 5, or how many fires do you have to put out at this moment, or what type of energy do you need to approach that moment with. So it's not about lowering expectations at all, but it's more about, like, if I have a sub, for instance, I'm not going to put in 15 details that I feel like need to jump through hoops, and just try to understand that what's going to get done is going to get done, and be okay with that, and sort of face that as a situation unto its own that says, hey, I'm not there for this and I need to let go of that. And it's okay. What I tell my subs when they're nervous, when I'm getting ready for a day that I'm going to be out, I say, listen, keep them alive, keep them safe, keep them happy, love them. And really we're approaching every situation with all of those levels. And when can we bring it to another level? When do I have have the capacity to bring it to another level? When do I need to lower a level? Something like that. So I hope that that helps folks in my idea. The idea is that, you know, everything we do in my classroom is important for my students' growth in everything. Everything can be applied to social and emotional learning. Everything can be applied to reading practice, because as we're learning more and the research shows about how schema and having an understanding of what that thing is that's coming up in the book, that's going to help kids read. So everything we do is going to help with everything. And just sort of passing that on to teachers to say, hey, don't take yourself so seriously right now. It's okay, because everything's applicable. Everything you do is going to be beneficial as long as you're given attention, you're being positive, you're doing all the things that are care and that are attentive and have the intention behind it. So and I also, one thing I wanted to add is about, if I'm feeling burnt out, they probably are too. You know, so it's a really good sort of canary in the gold mine of like, oh, I don't have the capacity for this. They might not either. Let's do something else. Let's do something that's going to recharge everybody's batteries, because it's not just me, it's not just them, it's everybody together. And when it comes down to it, the parts that I'm trying to do is just sort of regather my sense of purpose and say, okay, I want to make good kids. I want to have good values. I want them to create this community together. And being able to celebrate those wins, which I'll talk about in one of my later answers, about saying, you know, seeing kids do those things that you are trying to do, the good community things, a kid saying, hey, good try, to someone who didn't get something right, and saying, that's what we're going for here. So those are the things that keep me engaged in what I'm doing.
Oh, thank you for those insights, Rye. Our next question is for Celia. What systemic factors most impact teacher burnout or resilience in special education? And how can school leaders address those root causes?
All right, well, great. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I think that teacher burnout in special education, I think, is less about individual capacity and more about the systems around the educator. So some of the most significant systematic factors that I feel impact teacher burnout is unmanageable workload and role creep. So what I mean by role creep is, you know, carrying responsibilities beyond what's outlined in their job descriptions, and then all the other things like data collection, compliance, documentation, crisis response, case management. It just leads to like a chronic overload. Other factors include insufficient planning time and staffing. Also, I think, you know, a lack of protected collaboration time, and just even with their with paraprofessionals can cause a lot of burnout. Inconsistent, as an administrator, I'm going to say this, inconsistent administrative support. I think that teachers experience burnout when they feel unseen, unheard, or unsupported, particularly in behavior management, IEP decision making, and student placement. Limited access to training and resources, and I think school culture and climate can really be an impact when you have a climate that's not supportive, where people don't feel like they are making connections with each other. I think that can lead to burnout. I know that we really try in Hadley, teachers try and have time to get together outside of work hours and, you know, do team building activities, and I think that can really help alleviate burnout. I think some of the ways that school leaders can address these root causes include, you know, for the first, clarifying roles and limiting role creep. Obviously, protecting time for planning and collaboration, really building that in and ensuring that teachers have that is really important. Strengthening staffing structures. Those are all things that I believe can help. And I think scheduling regular co-planning, data review time, this can reduce after-hour work and improve instructional quality. And I just think it's really important to remember that when we build structures that protect planning time, clarify roles, strengthen staffing, and invest in ongoing support, We create schools where teachers can stay and thrive, and students will receive the high quality, consistent instruction they deserve. That's all I have for that one.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, Celia. So let's move on to our third question in this theme, and this is for Olivia. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a friend who texted me and said her audio isn't working. I don't know if anybody else, she said the closed captions is working, but I don't know if anybody else is having that problem.
Jana, are you still on? Did anyone else make a comment that
they're having trouble with that?
Okay, maybe is it her? Maybe have her
Sign in. It has you check your audio to make sure you can hear. It also I would suggest they sign off and sign back in, and it will give them option. What do you want to choose for an audio? They could choose another option. They might not be using the right audio selection.
Thanks, Jana. Thanks, Rye. Let us know if it works.
Yeah, because I'm hearing from other people that they're not having issues, so I know.
Okay. Thank you both. Our next question is for Olivia. Olivia, connection often sustains us with colleagues, mentors, and our students. Can you share an example of a moment or a relationship that reconnected you to your why as a special educator?
Oh, of course. Thank you guys for having me. So I work in a severe setting preschool kindergarten classroom at the North Shore Consortium. And so I feel like when you're working in the field of special education, all educators, their why really connects to this like deep sense of wanting to help students, whether that's of course it's academically, but also social emotionally and with their independence. So for me, working in an early childhood education classrooms that's total communication and foundational skills based, my why is really being able to help children develop effective communication skills. And so I just really wanted to take this opportunity to share about a relationship that I built with one of my students. So I'm going to call him P for this, but when I got P, he was 3 and he had just moved from Brazil, and he has autism and was nonverbal at the time. And so he had never really been exposed to English growing up in Brazil. And obviously neither of his parents spoke English. He had no exposure to sign language, PECs, and he really only communicated through his facial expressions. And because of that lack of ability to communicate functionally, he was engaging in high rates of very challenging behavior. And so after kind of taking that time to build the rapport with him and really figure out what he likes, it just so happened that he really liked when I would sing him songs, and I can't sing. So my poor IAs and my poor paras. But through that, through the songs, I was able to get him to start signing more by utilizing the hierarchy of cueing. Then from there, through singing, he started imitating the sound, which then turned to more, which then it turned into full sentences. And now I wanted to talk about this because I had his IEP meeting recently, and I shared for the student voice a montage essentially of the first time I caught it on video of him signing more, to then the first time he was imitating the sound, to then saying just the word more, to then I want more independently. And for me, that just really connects me to my why, because everyone deserves a voice and everyone deserves a way to functionally communicate, and getting to be a part of that really just connects to my purpose and my reason behind being a special educator. And that's all I've got.
Oh, Olivia, I'm sure I speak for everyone on the call. We really appreciate that thoughtful response. Very heartwarming. Our next question is for Catherine, and this is the last one in this theme category. So Catherine, we often tell teachers to practice self-care, but that can sound hollow without some structural support. What does collective care look like in your school or organization, or any previous organization that you've worked for?
Yeah, sure. Thank you all for having me tonight and being part of this panel. Self-care is difficult because as teachers, we are there for the students, and very often we don't recognize our own level of need, sometimes until it's too late. And it's even harder to be able to see someone else struggling and needing self-care and being able to step out of yourself and say, hey, what can I do to help you? In some of the organizations that I've worked at, the administration has supported just that, is being able to come together as a team and collectively support one another. At Lighthouse, we have a very unique situation where we do a 4-day in-person work week, and then on Fridays, we rotate a core group of staff leading a workshop, and the rest of the staff get to have a remote working day in order to do all their paperwork or catch up on IEPs or connections with students, which definitely takes a lot of pressure off of the staff. And I've seen a lot of administrators use mental health days for teachers in a very meaningful way, because sometimes that, oh, you have an extra day off, it really doesn't do enough for teachers. But seeing some administrators give that opportunity for a mental health day, but also do the support on the back end to ensure that that teacher feels they are really truly taking a day off, so that they don't have a substitute that's emailing them and texting them constantly to figure out what's going on in their classroom, or someone is stepping in and filling their role when it comes to the special education services so they can truly have a mental health day. And of course, self-care looks different for everyone. I think sometimes administrators make a knee-jerk effort to say, okay, well, let's do some team building. For some people, that team building might be that one last ask that is just too much for them. So having administrators who really truly know their staff and know that everybody needs something different is so important. And I think that that's what happens a lot at Lighthouse. We come together as a team to understand who needs what. Some people just need to sit in their office for an hour and do what they need to do without anyone coming up and knocking on their door. Or you need that one day of the week, especially in a substantially separate program like Olivia, you need one day where you can just eat lunch and not have tiny hands in your lunch. So we all have an idea of what we need, but coming together as a staff and recognizing that in one another, and then being able to actually say, hey, what can I do? And spreading that load, I think, is really important, especially in special ed. We don't want to be away from the kids, but at the same time, we need that time to decompress for sure.
Thank you, Catherine. So we've discussed some really important issues around teacher well-being and sustainability, and now we're going to move into our second theme for the evening tonight. And the next set of questions is going to focus on family partnerships and collaboration between teachers and families. And our first question, we're going to go back to Rye. Family engagement is vital to student success. What are some authentic strategies you've seen for building trust and true collaboration with families of students with disabilities?
I have worked really hard at developing my relationships with families over the years. I used to work at a high school with students who were not deaf, and I had a lot of contact with parents. And the high school age versus where I teach now is the elementary. It's a really different focus of engagement for parents. But one of the things I was taught at some point over the years was just assume they're all engaged. We have different levels of engagements with parents. And so I just treat all of them as if they want to know every little thing that has happened, and they can take it or leave it on their end. But I want to give the intention to them that they know how much care and thought and attention is going into my side of the day, of how much I care about them, their kids. And that's something that is part of my sort of thing about celebrating all these wins. It's like, if you are going to have a hard conversation with parents at some point, you really need to have had all of the really good conversations first. And so celebrating all those wins, sending pictures, sending stories, that goes a long, long way. And again, if a family isn't into it or whatever, they can take it or leave it. But then you have a really great foundation to go off of. I also have noticed over the years that it's really smart to get on the good side of any staff interpreters that you're working with, because they'll go an extra mile for you if they see, the intention that you have and how much you want to give to connect with their families. Working with interpreters is extremely difficult in any language. I'm also an interpreter on the side. And so when I can work with my deaf families directly, I know how much that means to them because they're not going through an interpreter. And so when I am having to use another spoken language interpreter, I know how much is missing because I can see it in the relationships I don't have with the families compared to the ones that I do have a direct language connection with. And so if you have a good relationship with the staff interpreters, if you're lucky enough to have staff interpreters and you have regular people, then it can become more of a comfortable situation. It can be more comfortable for everybody because, again, it's that relationship building on both sides, with you to the interpreter to the family, because they have to develop that trust also. I also noticed that I have way more luck with parents if I'm using more of a text-based platform of some sort instead of an email, because people are just in that mindset now. They're adults just like us, and we respond faster to text, so do they. And if they prefer, an email, I'll check in with people at some point, but I don't know many folks these days who prefer email. They'd rather just respond with a thumbs up or an emoji, just like any other social media type of thing. So you send them a picture and they send back a heart, and it's like that. We're doing it, that we're having our own Facebook about their kid. And that goes a long way with the celebration of successes, so that when we do have to have those hard conversations, we've already built that platform. So showing care, telling stories, that's what was in my notes for that one. And those are all my notes for that one.
Thank you, Rye. Those are some
Sure.
excellent points. Excellent. Moving on, we are finally going to hear from Natalie. Yay, Natalie. So Natalie, when challenges arise in family-school communication, what practices help move from conflict to collaboration?
And I'm going to kind of go from where Rye was a moment ago, that care part. Way we build that is through experience, right? The longer we work in the special education field, the longer that we study, and the more that we practice with the families. A lot of it has to do with transparency. It's got to be with authenticity. If your child had a bad day at school, the teacher knows, right? And they should be able to communicate that back and forth, and to know perhaps medication wasn't available this morning, or perhaps it was a long weekend away from home, or maybe the child's coming back from a sickness. So I kind of speaking from the Bay Path perspective, how do we teach our graduate students, right, how to go about this? We have students that come from little experience, some that are transferring from another career, right? They want to come and they're tired of working perhaps in the traditional classroom, and they want to gain more expertise in a field with students. So one thing that they always do is with those discussion posts, right? We're reading text that asks students to study empirical notes about how we connect with the parents that are struggling sometimes at, their kids have mental or physical or, reading disabilities, all different kinds, autism and maladaptive behaviors that can come with it. So how do we support those kind of things that people may not have been exposed to as much? So I love the discussion posts. They're always going to a point where, even though, say, Olivia in her preschool classroom, saw this, and then connect with Rye in another, and then you have another person who maybe doesn't have that, but they do collectively kind of learn some of those techniques, right? And gain some experience. So when problems do arise, then there's the more particular things, right? Like perhaps a parent, at least, as a school psychologist will say, my child's not making progress. And we sit down for the 3-year and their argument is, their test scores are not higher. How come their cognitive scores and their academic scores haven't improved? I've been working with my child all this time. And sometimes with that, it looks like it could be very problematic. It hurts a little bit. And we're supposed to be doing more, but you have to explain to the parents it's a different child 3 years. When they were 8, they're different now that they're 11. It's different norms. So a lot of those practices do come with experience and they come with collaboration. And there's also comes with those little venting moments. I know I have in my classes where I'll say, okay, let's just take a minute. Maybe we'll go into some small groups, vent, kind of get a handle of it and help from your classmates too. And say, oh, I did that. That happened once. Oh, this is what I tried. So I hope that helps a little bit in terms of that conversation.
Really insightful, Natalie. Thank you. Our last question for this theme is going to go to Olivia and Catherine both. So how do we sustain partnerships with families who are also navigating stress, trauma, or systemic barriers? I'm not sure which of you would like to start.
Catherine, I can go ahead.
Yeah.
So going back to what Rye and Natalie both said, I think it all just starts with creating a relationship that's based on compassion. And I feel like it's on us as teachers to kind of create that relationship where families feel comfortable enough to be able to share what they're going through. Because a lot of the time, we don't know what they don't tell us. So I think a lot of that comes from like what Rye said, like talking about the wins. So then when those conversations come up that maybe aren't as great, they're kind of, you have a better foundation to build it off of. And from experience, one of my students last year, they were living in a homeless shelter and administration didn't let me know. But through building a good, strong relationship with the student's mom, she felt comfortable enough to kind of share with me and shared with me, like, you know what, like, I can't send in food right now. I need these sort of supports. I don't have home services. I don't have ABA. And so I was able to kind of get her in contact with our social worker and get her some of the supports that she needed. So, but she would have never told me if we didn't have that strong relationship to begin with. Because yeah, that's what I've got to say.
And I agree wholeheartedly with Olivia. It's all about building relationships. I have the older kiddos, and also we're in downtown Holyoke, which is a very depressed area. And there aren't a lot of opportunities for the parents there. And like Olivia, I have a lot of children who are living in homeless shelters or they're crashing on people's couches. And since we have the older ones, we not only have to develop that relationship with parents and guardians, but we also have to develop that relationship with the students themselves, because some of them are closing in on adulthood and they need to be able to make their own decisions. And in some cases, their trauma backgrounds make it very difficult for them to be able to function when there is a big decision that needs to be made, like getting a job or finding housing for themselves, or do I sign on voluntarily to DCF or do I not? Do I look for adult services or do I not? So that transition piece for them is really tough. But if you have that solid relationship with them and with whatever parents, guardians, and other service providers are involved, you're more likely to be able to provide them with something that is actually helpful and give them that opportunity to rely on those services instead of leaving our school with no preparation.
Thank you both. This is giving us a lot to think about. So we're going to shift to our third and final theme for this evening, and that's sustaining the future of special education. Our first question is going to go to Celia. Looking ahead, how can we design more sustainable systems in policy, preparation, and practice that protect teacher well-being while prioritizing student needs? That's a heavy one.
That is a heavy one. I'm getting all like the systems and like all the clinical questions. Um, well, I think one, to create sustainable systems, we need to shift from relying on individual resilience to intentionally designing environments that support teacher well-being while also advancing student learning, obviously. Um, so I think one of the most important things is to embed teacher voice in decision making at district and school levels, in whatever format that you can do that. So you want teacher input on their caseload. You want to hear, like, is this manageable? And if you're struggling, why? Like, so it's one of the things that's really important is like staffing models need to account for student complexity and not just student counts. So you don't want to just say, okay, every special ed teacher is going to have a caseload of 10 when, you need to look at what the services are, what the needs of the student are. And having teacher input into that is really important. And then just making sure that you're defining and protecting manageable caseloads and planning time. I think you also need to strengthen training and pathways. So having high quality mentoring and induction programs for new special educators, really for all educators, I think is really important. And I think as a leader, if you don't have a sense on how to build that, it's really important to check with leaders in other districts about what they're doing and, sort of hunt around and figure out, what is a good model. I think we talk a lot like on service delivery grids, sometimes we talk about like front loading services. Well, I think it's the same for school districts in that sometimes you have to spend a little more upfront, kind of like front loading it in terms of like maybe getting a consultant in or something to help build up some of these programs. But in the long term, it's going to probably save you money because teacher turnover really affects schools. And when you have a school system that has a good reputation, it brings in school choice families. School choice families obviously bring in school choice money. So you need to have a good reputation, and turnover and burnout, families learn about that and it impacts your district. And then also new teachers with a lot of turnover impacts student learning. I think scheduling regular time for co-planning, I spoke about that before, and data reflection is really important. That also helps build relationships for teachers when they have time to co-plan and work together and collaborate together. Giving teachers opportunities to go and observe other teachers in their classrooms and see what other teachers are doing is another great strategy that I think can be used. And then providing ongoing job embedded support. So offering instructional coaching, behavior support teams, mentoring for new staff, in addition to the onboarding systems, and access to mental health support is also really important. And I know this is kind of long-winded, but I just want to throw something out there also. I think it's really important to expand teacher training in behavior support and in trauma-informed practices. And I think that we can't assume that this is taught in teacher preparation programs. And I have this weird little side note, but we had a paraprofessional come in and she was assigned to work with a student who has a trauma history. And this really impacted her because she had a trauma as a child, and she had a lot of trouble working with this student who had a trauma history, and it impacted her and it brought back memories. And so we listened to that and we made a change. But I think that people need to understand that behaviors from someone who's experienced trauma is going to look different from behaviors for a student that has a different type of disability. So I think I've kind of over my time on this question, so I will stop, but that's my response to that.
Thank you for diving into that, like some really excellent points. So thank you. Our next question is for Catherine. If you could offer one message to new or aspiring special educators, what would it be about sustaining this work for the long term?
So after 25 years of doing this, I'm going to circle right back to what Rye said in the beginning, and you have to not take yourself so seriously. This is one of the more difficult but most rewarding places to be in education. And most of us, I think, would agree that if you don't laugh about it, you'll probably cry about it. And yes, crying in special ed is totally fine. We all do it multiple times throughout our career, but it's important to find a way to maintain your passion and love for education. And remember that you're working with students who will do well if and when they can, but you have to also be there for the days when they can't do well. And you have to remember that it's not about you, it's about them. And your responsibility is to them as a learner, as a human being, as a kid, as someone who has experienced trauma that we can never truly identify with. And that self-care piece, as much as we throw that term around, you have to find something that you love that can also give you an outlet from thinking all day, every day about, I didn't get this done in the classroom today, or this kid had a terrible day and I could have done something about it, but I didn't. Those are the things that you need to leave behind in order to find that lifelong love of what you're doing. And I think once you do that and you balance all of that out, you're in it for the long haul.
Thank you, Catherine. Oh, this is such a rich discussion. Our last question is for Natalie. And we're going to switch gears a little bit to kind of focus on teacher preparation now. Natalie, in what ways can teacher preparation programs better equip future special educators to partner effectively from families from diverse backgrounds?
And that's where I'm going to go right back to BPATH and the caliber of students and the energy that comes when the students connect with each other during classes, when they follow the program, when you're able to not maybe know what a substantially separate program looks like and start learning some of those words in special education, or AAC devices, right? They're augmentative and alternative communication tools that we're finding with technology, right? If our students nonverbal, but also bilingual, or not, parents are bilingual, like how do we bridge and connect the diversity that is in our classroom? It could be a financial diversity, it's a cultural, there are the knowledge gaps that some people have and those that bring a lot of insight to the table. So if we look at the different cultural factors with the AAC devices, right? I had one student and it was when they put a Cheeto on there, and I'm not going to say it's the red hot Cheetos, like the ones that have those terrible chemicals, but Cheeto was the connection to that child that also made it connect to home. And then he decided that he had more ownership, right? And so a lot of what we're looking at with students that are from diverse backgrounds are how do we connect? So it goes back to that thing before, make those family connections, make those student connections, make the graduate student connections too, where you're making those relationships and you're seeing people for the amount of depth that they have, right? We're not all coming to this race at the same pace, right? Some of us have run the race many times and some are just going on their first one. So I think a lot of that connection when we're looking at diversity and collaboration is really where the educator preparation program empowers teachers and professionals to be able to take it to the next level, whether it being holding more responsibility, getting another licensure, moving along in their career. Sometimes teachers start and they're first grade teachers and they want to stay as that first grade teacher, right? But then some others want to evolve and kind of use more of what they learned. So we got to take a look at some of that technology piece that we can do and support the language development. And I also think that the high caliber and expectations that are held in teacher education programs, yes, be, forgiving on yourself because you're doing a good job and, do go back to work tomorrow. They want you there, but also that, it is a career and it's a professional role. And those programs and the people you can lean back to too and say, oh man, did I do this right? They can tell you, and then you're growing because you're learning. That's what this is about, really, is the learning piece in school.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you all for those thoughtful and inspiring insights. Now I think we'd love to hear from our audience. So I'm going to open it up. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box and we will have our panelists answer your questions. And I believe, Jana, you're taking questions and are going to read them off?
Yes, it will come into the question box.
Yes.
We do have one already if you want me to get started.
Perfect. Thank you.
The first question is, beyond addressing burnout, how do we actively foster positive indicators of well-being, such as enthusiasm for teaching, career optimism across all staff?
Good question. So I have a panelist who wants to take that.
I can, oh, right, go ahead. Okay. Well, I touched on this a little bit in my first response, but I think one of the really important things that schools can do, districts can do, is allow time for team building in like a fun manner. So I know sometimes people like kind of roll their eyes when they think about doing some of this stuff, but when you actually do it, it can be a lot of fun. When you just embed like weird, fun games that teachers can do together, anything like that you can get really creative with. Again, I've just had so many experiences where people are like, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, and everybody is dying, laughing, and having the best time, and then they're thinking we should do this again. So anytime you can create fun for teachers for collaboration time, I think go for it.
Thank you, Celia. Rai, do you want to add?
Can you read the question again? I'm not sure if I interpreted it right.
Sure. It says, beyond addressing burnout, how do we actively foster positive indicators of well-being, such as enthusiasm for teaching, career optimism across all staff? I think what the person is asking is that, you know, you've all given suggestions on it's important to address burnout, but not really talked about how do administrators know that they're actually effective in doing that with their staff? What does that look like?
I think two things that came to mind for me was that idea about administrators and how they're keeping tabs on how people are doing and the mechanisms for our well-being. My school does a lot of positive stuff for staff. We have like a sunshine day committee, so there's like little stuff here and there. One thing that's been really popular is like an underground spirit week, where it's just the staff spirit week. So we all have a thing for each day, but the students don't know about it. And sometimes they like pick up on it, but it's just a really great little way for staff to keep together. But one thing that I would love to see my school do more of is having more opportunities for hearing our concerns and, you know, in a positive way, instead of it being when an issue comes up and people have to complain in a way, instead of being invited to share their opinions, then it becomes pretty dramatic in like an us versus them type of thing. And that doesn't help with anybody's well-being, because those dynamics can be so challenging, and we're already dealing with so many challenging things, that just in the same way that we work hard to create that relationship with our families so that when things do get hard, we have a better relationship. I want to see that from the administrative side also, so that when things do get hard, we have more of a relationship than just the us them. You're the employee, we're the employer, it's because I said so, but having more of the relationship that we preach about it. So let's do it with all of our connections, no matter what people's roles are. Those are two things that came to mind for that.
Thank you, Rai.
Another question is, what are some specific examples that each of you have done to make sure that you're including cultural perspectives and specific needs of your families?
So something that I do is I send home a questionnaire at the beginning of the year, just kind of asking about what holidays the families celebrate, any very like important cultural dishes, because I do cooking group, so that I can kind of get those in there. I ask for music, so I can, in my visual music choice book, I can have diverse music choices. And everything in between. I think it's really important to ask families, and a questionnaire is a really good way to do that.
Anyone else?
I built on that too, as Olivia. I often do a parent interview where I'll, in a background review, kind of to have a very solid understanding of any particular pieces of a student's presentation that are important to know more about them, because we want to get a good picture and develop those good relationships. Definitely check with the English as a second language teacher to make sure that the home language survey has, if it has another language, that would be a definite starting point as well.
I do think it's important too, if like there's a holiday that comes up that we don't really know too much about, that you on your own time kind of research that holiday, so then you can teach the class about it as well.
Right.
We took on a cultural fair last year, and for a lot of students whose first language is sign language, they don't know the name for several of the cultural symbols, foods, customs, clothes. And that was a lot of legwork on the teacher's part, because I did a lot of interviews with parents and got the names of kids' favorite foods. We do a lot of Google searches of images. You know, tell me what it has. Kids tell me, you know, this family's from Sri Lanka. Okay, tell me about this, tell me this. Looking at Google, okay, is it this one? Is it this one? And then the kid's like, it's my favorite one. That's, you know, we find out the name for it and we print it up and giving, you know, the English word for it and the word in their language for it, and just giving kids that empowerment of what they see at home and bringing it to school. And then having, you know, we had a big share out, and it was a pretty, it was a lot of work on the teacher's end because of that, needing to find out all of those different cultural things that I wasn't familiar with, but empowering the students in that way of owning it and sharing it. And then kids who maybe haven't connected before saying, oh, you're Puerto Rican, I'm Puerto Rican, what's your favorite food? And being able to show their board and say, oh, that's my favorite one, and now I know the name for it, instead of just describing it. Also, I'm lucky this year to have two families who are actually deaf themselves. Their parents are deaf. My kids' parents are deaf. And so I've been able to invite parents in. This family is from Moldova, and so she came in and taught us about Moldovan Sign Language, so kids learned a different sign language, you know. So we had this really cool opportunity for that. And then another grandparent who's deaf comes in and does story time with us. So we're really, you know, not just expanding their home culture, but also our school culture as deaf identity. And so that's one way that I've done that in the classroom.
Those are some great examples. Excellent.
All right, just one more question. We only have one more question. So it says, what are some strategies for forming partnerships between teachers and parents that you use to accommodate students with disabilities? For example, how do you make IEP meetings more collaborative, not so compliance driven?
I think one of the things that's become helpful is if you are a team chair, someone who that's your only job is to run IEP meetings, a lot of times parents don't get an actual connection to the team chair. Like the first time they hear from them is when they're calling to remind them about the IEP meeting. So I think taking the time to connect with parents before the meeting happens and make them feel like you're getting to know them, you're getting to know their kids, so that when you are at the table, you do still have to take care of the compliance pieces, but you're kind of slipping that in as you're having a conversation about the student. And with the new Massachusetts IEP, students are having more input in their IEPs, and actually many of them are coming to the meetings now, and just having a chat around the table about that student and the student's needs is really important, and having the compliance stuff kind of buzzing in the background. Like, you know, it's compliance stuff, but parents don't need to know that. Parents need to know that you're taking care of their kid.
I'll throw something out there too. Excuse me. I think, well, one thing that we have, which took me a few years to build up, is we have a very strong and active CPAC, Special Ed Parent Advisory Council. And one of the ways that we did that was giving them meeting space in the school. So they meet in our teacher conference room area once a month. And initially also, as the district, we provided like refreshments and snacks, reached out to the parents to see what they wanted, and sort of just built that trust that they were welcome in the school. So it's really become like a lot of parents love to attend. They're already dropping their kids off in the morning anyways at the school, so it's convenient. They feel welcome in the school. So that's one of the things that has been really helpful. And then I think in terms of meetings, you know, even as the special ed director. Oh, sorry, I just started echoing. Did anybody hear that?
I hear that too.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm present at a lot of meetings, so I'm not like very, you know, far removed in some distant land where, you know, parents don't know how to get in touch with me. I play an active role. I'm present in the schools. We only have 2 schools. I'm lucky in that way that it's a smaller district, but you know, and our superintendent is like that as well. Like, we're reachable, we're present, we're there, and I think that makes parents feel more comfortable that, you know, we're approachable and we want to listen and we want to hear them.
Thank you. Is that it
I
for
like to
questions?
sit with my parents at IEP meetings because it can be so intimidating. I really just want to be someone that they know because they know me the best, and I just want to sit with them and be able to be a support for them physically in that presence way that Cecilia was talking about. Celia, sorry. Your name's cut off my screen. I was like, oh no.
Jana, are there any more questions?
Nope, that was it for questions.
All right. So I just want to thank you to all our incredible panelists for your wisdom, your candor, and to everyone who joined this meaningful conversation. Today reminded us that sustaining special education isn't just about endurance, it's about connection to ourselves, our students, and the families we serve. Just a reminder, recording of this session will be shared via email with all registrants. And on behalf of Bay Path University, thank you for the work you do every day to make inclusion and excellence possible for our learners. Have a great night.
Yep, and I just want to add, there is some information on the screen here. Dr. Leck's contact information is here, as well as myself as the Director of Graduate Admissions. If you are interested in learning more about Bay Path programs or how to advance your career or even get in on one of those trauma certificates that we offer, please be sure to reach out and we'll be more than happy to help you. Have a great evening, everyone.